for Foster Parent Support Services. And in the room with me is Dan Malone, our Executive Director, Krista Hazeldine, she's our support, and Eva Vowles, our Education Coordinator. And we have a few foster parents who will be joining us electronically. We're recording this webinar live, so that will be available for foster parents on Vancouver Island. And the actual presentation will be approximately 25 to 30 minutes, after which time we will have time for questions and answers that foster parents may have. So until then, I'm going to just ask everyone other than the presenters to put their phones and their computers on mute. And so if we do have caregivers that are joining us late, I just want to give you a heads up that some may be leaving early as well, because we're recording this in the middle of the day, and people have to leave early and pick up their kids from school and do all that pick up and drop off stuff. So again, welcome. Our presenters today are Matthew Pakozdy and his mother, Judy Pakozdy. Matt lives in Victoria, and Judy lives in the Yukon. Matt is a young man with FASD. I have personally known Matt for a number of years. I've watched him go through some difficult times in his life, and here he is all grown up and an amazing young man. His mother, Judy, has been a fierce advocate and voice for people with FASD, including her son, Matt. So the topic of the presentation, again, is FASD and the education system. We chose this topic because problems with the school are some of the biggest problems that parents and children with youth with FASD have, especially when the expectation is that they can succeed academically without appropriate support. So also on the call is Natalie Brake. So welcome, everyone. Dan, did you want to say anything before we turn it over to the presenters?
No, I just thank you for presenting on this topic. I'm really excited.
Natalie has left the conference.
To have this, first recorded webinar.
Great. So, Matt, take it away.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this webinar. This means a lot to me that you all took the time to tune in as we explore some insights about FASD. We have three of us here for the presentation, myself, and one of my supporter workers, Natalie, who is helping with the presentation, and my mother, Judy, who will be part of the question and answer later on. Okay, let's get started. So as you probably know, people who live successfully with FASD aren't having good lives by accident. Most often, they have a can-do attitude, a team that works together, and a system that makes all of those moving parts work towards the same goals. That is what I'm going to be talking about today. Today, I'm going to tell you about my experiences.
Has joined the conference.
Including going through the school, because I know that's a big topic that needs some attention. My early life is a very common story to many First Nations born into the alcoholism. I was born in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and was the seventh of 8 kids. My birth mother was part Inuit, and she struggled with alcohol. Her father had been a whaler with 18 children. All of my brothers and sisters had some degree of prenatal alcohol exposure, but each one of us was affected differently. We were all adopted into different families and now live across Canada. My mother, Judy, adopted me when I was 1 year old. She knew I had FASD from the beginning, and she raised me on her own as a single mother. There was no luck for her. My mom followed some practical steps, which I will be talking about today. Soon after my adoption, Mom and I moved to Whitehorse, and we began a normal life, but of course with the added element of me having FASD. I started taking dance classes at the age of 5, including tap, Highland, jazz, and ballet. During my school years, I struggled with my FASD, but had an educational assistance helper along the way. He graduated from college, and basically just kept me focused. For example, he would take me out for walks. It was kindergarten, so learning how to sit in a circle and listen to other kids talk was hard. However, I did love stories, and so I sat in the circle and was able to be a better listener when the EA was with me. My mom says that looking back in hindsight, she might have started me in school a year later because I was very high energy. It was definitely a huge benefit to me having the educational assistants present. Also, my teacher thought that I was so cute and normal looking, so having him there helped me remind my teacher that I did actually have an invisible disability. Eventually, I moved on to another school, one that my mom had scoped out as a way of advocating for me. The principal guaranteed her that I would always get the nicest teachers each year. I was then supported by another EA who worked with another boy who also had FAS. His name was Albert. The EA and I did really well together, and I spent much time learning life skills such as using the phone, the bus, maps, and making my lunches and whatnot. My friend Albert could tell time, and so he helped me with that too. Albert and I were both very good readers, and we loved to listen to stories. We had a nice time together, and my teachers and I had a great relationship, so that worked out really well. In grade and high school, I was enrolled in many dance classes every week, starting with tap, Highland, and jazz. Being in so many activities meant I met many kids from other parts of town and had a very busy dance life. I remember having lots of fun because I loved being involved in the performing arts, and that's where I really excelled. However, things were definitely not always as easy. When I got to high school, I was placed in a special class that was not as supportive as it could have been, although they did their best. For example, they got me a part-time job sorting jeans by size at the sand store. Not very much fun for a song and dance man. So that was not ideal as far as nurturing my strengths. Well, in high school, I was again involved in music, art, drama, and dance course, MAD. I also did a regular high school subjects like English, history, math, and arithmetic. And because I was getting a lot of experience, I also taught some of the other students to dance as part of my program. When all was said and done, I did complete high school, and I started in my graduation prom with a dance performance, which was so awesome for me. And as you are learning by now, I was pretty much always supported in school, but only because my mom was a huge advocate and was always keeping her finger on the pulse of my success. After high school, I spent 2 years at the Canadian College of Performing Arts in Victoria, BC. There, I completed a certificate program in the arts with a modified learning for budgeting and career planning. I taught dance in Victoria for the next 8 years, and other than the intense planning and scheduling involved, I loved teaching dance. When I was 25 years old, I decided to go to the University of Victoria. And again, I had support from my FASD. I was part of a program called Steps Forward, which was based on campus for supporting people with disabilities so that they can navigate the university experience. Once the support workers at Steps Forward understood my disability, they were able to talk with my professors about what they could expect from me. This made a huge difference. Another very helpful part of the university was that I chose the courses I wanted to learn about because I was in a modified program. I chose choreography and First Nations art. For example, although I am Inuit and I felt a deep connection to the First Nations class more than the actual fine arts. Also, if the professor agreed, I could audit my courses before starting with them from the help of my support workers. I also did the only assignment I understood that I could succeed at. This was good because it kept my confidence up instead of setting me up for failure, which sometimes happens for people with FASD. During university, I also worked part-time at the campus coffee shop called Bean There, which I really loved. I didn't handle the cash, but I helped take orders and whatnot. It was always busy, and I met a lot of neat new people, and I got along really well with my fellow workers. Overall, I really enjoyed most of the time I was a university student. My graduation at the end of those 4 years was held at the First Nations building. We celebrated it with a First Nations ceremony. Another thing that made me so successful in managing my FASD was being part of the Cowichan Valley FASD team as a mentor for 6 years. As a mentor, I learned so much about FAS and from all kinds of perspectives. I'm so well informed about this disability of mine. Now I'm able to identify the help that I need and seek it out and accept it from people. I know that help is so important and has become a natural part of my life now. I can also relate to the FASD parents and kids that I can give them tips and insights about this disability. So being a mentor was a great part of my early adult development. These days, I work part-time as a front desk assistant at the nonprofit organization called Macola. I've been there for about 5 years, and I have a modified position, and everybody does know I have FASD. I also travel around Canada speaking with people such as you about managing FASD and diversity. If there was one thing I could talk about regarding invisible disabilities like FAS, I would choose to talk about advocacy. And to me, advocacy means that if I want to have a good life, I have to accept my condition and seek help from others. I think of it as taking a radical responsibility for my life. I've realized over the years, and trust me, sometimes I've learned the hard way, that the more I let the right people help me, the more I achieve in my personal and professional life. It means that despite wishing I could do more things more independently, I have come to terms with the reality that I cannot. I am an adult with a disability, and that means I will always need quality care and support. And I need to accept that and be sure that the people around me understand it as well. Once I finally came to terms with that, everything changed for me. And I've even noticed that people without disabilities use support and help to their advantage. So really, there is something to it, and that's the main message today: advocacy, support, and the difference it makes. I think one way that the picture gets really clear is to pretend that you can see two paths and you are standing at the crossroads of them. Down one path is a life with a disability and little or no supports along the way. On the other path is the same person with great advocates and supports along the way. Now, I know it sounds so obvious, well, of course you should choose the second path. Yet, I've been at crossroads myself, and sometimes I choose the path where I feel like I didn't need or want the support. So I tried it out on my own. Usually this was just to prove that to myself that I don't need help and that I'm okay without it. I can tell you that never lasted long. I've been in trouble with the law. I made some poor relationship decisions. I've gotten generally lost different times in my life. But because my mom helped me learn about supports and advocacy early on, it never really lasted long. And I always found my way back to the path. That really works for my life and goals. University and continuing education can really make a difference in a person's confidence as well. But it has to include support and advocacy. We all know what it's like for young adults and children and adults with invisible disabilities who really struggle because of the various reasons. They don't have a diagnosis, the community they live in doesn't provide the resources they need, or the support they require is not adequate enough. A lot of people have workers, but they still need more, including more involvement, more understanding, better training, and resources. Those with a disability deserve a good life, and we deserve to access these tools. What I've learned with the help of my mother and other people in the FASD community is that there is help out there, but we all need to commit to taking those steps that are beyond just surviving with a disability. People with disabilities want to thrive. We want to be productive and passionate, successful. Like all people, we do have dreams, and they can be accomplished. So it's really about the following path and the steps that are provided to work. I've never really stopped learning throughout my whole life, and I'm always striving for the best out in my life. Last year, I took a Zumba instructor's course, and it's another thing that makes me feel great. The achievement, the social interaction, and the exercise. Plus, I get to make extra income, which is always wonderful as well. I also recently moved into my own place, which is awesome. And how could I mention my happiness without telling you about my little wiggle bums, Maggie? She's a boxer, and she's my best friend, and I care for her like a dad. There's nothing better than coming home to her wagging tail and unconditional love. She is a very huge part of my happiness. So, that all being said, I would like to thank you so much for listening to me and for your time and curiosity. And in the next segment, my mom and I will be taking questions together. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Matt. That was amazing. So we do have some questions that are starting to come in. One of them is, at what age did you start to receive additional support? What grade at school did you start to receive additional support?
Do you know that answer, Mom?
Well, yes, you got support right from kindergarten because I paid for it the first year. And after that, at the new school, the people were more likely to provide that support. I don't know if they were afraid of me or what, but it worked.
Good answer, Judy. So what kind of supports were put into place for Matt?
Mostly he had a half-time EA that he shared with one other boy all through grade school and for parts of high school.
Right. And so what subjects academically was Matt needing additional support in?
He actually had a modified curriculum. He could read by the time he started school, which was a miracle as far as I was concerned, because that was the only thing I was worried about, that he wouldn't be able to read. Math has never been a strength, and so we stopped doing any kind of math or math homework by about grade 3. I tried to explain to the principal that I knew how to add and subtract, and I was surviving just fine, so would Matt. But he was not happy that we chose not to do homework, but there were so many other things that he had to learn just about life in general that if we focused everything at home on homework, it was very hard on the relationship.
That's such a good point, Judy, about the struggles with math. I hear that that's just so common with individuals with FASD, and the part about that not being a barrier in your relationship.
Right.
Because I think that does happen a lot with parents and with teachers that don't recognize the strengths and the abilities where people need those additional supports.
Right.
And that does get frustrating, I think, because of the expectations.
Well, I think the problem is that people assume that if you don't have academic qualifications, you can't have a good life, and that's just not true.
I'll just ask both of you on there. I want to ask about going to post-secondary education. And I don't think it's a public knowledge that everyone knows that a person with disabilities or without all the academic qualifications can go to university. How did you find out about that?
Well, initially, when he went to the college, I had to pay for everything, for his support worker and everything else, because he was out of province for us, because we lived in the Yukon, and he moved to BC, and so he wasn't a BC resident, so he didn't qualify for supports. But the school, the College of Performing Arts, was extremely accommodating, and they actually assigned 2 of the senior students to be his mentors. So they worked turnabout day by day with him, making sure that he got there, that he knew where his classes were, that he ate his lunch, that he could figure out what class he was supposed to be in right now. and they were very helpful. And he loved it. And I remember I did some training with the principals of the school to try to take away some of their fears about having a disabled student in their group. And one of them called me around the end of November and said, you know, I want you to know Matthew's not even close to the most disabled kid here, but he's the only one that's labeled. So he did really well in that setting. And then when he went to university, it was a special program that was funded through CLBC, this Steps Forward program, and it helps 6 to 10 students every year experience the university experience.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was. I really, when they first said it, I thought, well, what do we need that for? But Matthew loved it, so that's what we needed it for.
So, Judy, did you find that the advocacy was an ongoing support that you needed to provide? Something that I hear often from parents is that they fight hard to get those supports put into place for their children, and then they start doing well in school, and then the supports are removed because the perception is that they no longer need those supports.
Right, and because we know that the reason they're doing well is because they have finally got adequate supports, it's something that you never can stop. I've got things set up for when I die so that I've got new people, young people trained to understand Matthew's disability so that they can support him through the years when I'm gone.
Wow. So how did you do that? Like, how have you put that into place?
Well, I conned one of my nieces who is already a good friend of Matthew's, and she's probably the closest to him of all our family members, and she and her husband have agreed to take on the task of being Matthew's primary advocate and support person when I'm gone.
So, Matt, I had a question for you.
Uh-huh.
How was that for you going to school? Did you find that were you frustrated a lot in school?
During middle school, when I was younger, or high school, or
Any area, like if you had to, like starting with elementary school?
I think that elementary school was the hardest for me because, again, as my mom said, I really had little to no support before educational assistance came. And every time the teacher would do a really fast timetable with the students, I couldn't even do the first one. I was very behind in a lot of the subjects that they were doing. I remember having to stay behind in class a few times. When every other student would go home at 3 o'clock, I had to stay behind 20 minutes so that I can finish my subject. I remember a lot of hard knocks being as a young, in grade 3, 4, and 1. It was just really hard. It wasn't very fun. I didn't enjoy it.
That sounds like it would have been very difficult.
Yes, yeah, it was very difficult, very frustrating.
And did that get easier as you got older? Because I know that the subjects, they become more difficult and the material more abstract. How was that for you when you went into middle school?
Once I got into middle school and my mom got an educational assistance and got me more help and support, I could actually focus on the task, and it was all modified. So that meant that it was the same thing that the students were learning in class, but for me it was dumbed down, not dumbed down, but modified in a sense so that I could understand it and see it visually, because I was a visual learner. I could see things. I'd rather look at them than actually hear them. So, and any person, any youth person, adult with FASD, as for intaking information from another person, we probably hear every third word if there's a lot coming at us. So with the modification that I did in middle school, the educational assistant helped me understand what that whole sentence meant. She modified it, and it just made it so much easier.
Like an example of that is that when his class was studying Shakespeare, he and Albert got to watch the videos of the plays instead of having to read the plays. So for Romeo and Juliet, they compared an old classical movie, 1960s movie, and a really current movie of Romeo and Juliet. So they really got what the story was about.
That's a really good example, Judy. Thank you for that. So I'm just wondering, just a little bit off the topic of FASD and the educational system. Matt, you mentioned your job at Macola, that people there know that you have FASD.
Yep.
How are you finding people's level of understanding and awareness around what FASD is?
At my work or just in general?
Well, at your work and in general, I suppose. Yeah, both.
I think that, well, first of all, at my work, the people who have been with me the longest for the past 5 years, who work with me the longest at Macola, understand that, yes, I have FASD. And it's not that they modify things, it's that they lessen the workload. So my boss, basically her assistant, anybody who has understood the fact that I can only handle so much, they get it, they understand it, and if it's too much, then they say, okay, well, let's change it and do something else that is not so stressful. So, and the thing about it is the great part is that they're very supportive in anything that I don't like or that stresses me out. If I need a break for 5 minutes and need to get out of the building for a while and just go for a walk, they'll let me. They won't just say, okay, you need to keep working, or they won't say, well, just deal with it. They actually understand it. They get it.
So they obviously have a fairly good understanding of the supports that people with FASD need.
Yeah.
And I think, too, that when there is an issue and Matt doesn't feel they get it, he can arrange for one of his support workers to go in and speak with people, and they're very receptive to that process.
Well, that's an unusual employer.
You're not kidding.
Doesn't happen very often. So in the general public, what level of understanding of FASD do you think people have?
I don't, well, I've been saying this for many years, but I have to say that I think that a lot of people out there do have some knowledge of FASD, but a lot of them don't. I don't know how many times I've heard about the school system, the teachers not having enough knowledge about FASD, the court system not having enough knowledge about FASD, basically the workplace in general not having enough knowledge about FASD. If an adult with FASD wants to work in a workplace and wants to get the support and needs the support in order to work well in that workplace, and if there was more knowledge out there, and if the people who work in a workplace or the courts or the teachers and the principals went to these conferences, the workshops, more often to learn about this disability, then I think that adults with FASD could work much better and do well, and vice versa, that the teachers and the court system and all that other stuff, they would have more knowledge about and understand more, and it wouldn't be so frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I have another question that's come in. How did you get your diagnosis of FASD?
Mother?
He was diagnosed at birth. He was the seventh of 8 children who all had prenatal alcohol exposure, and the vast majority of them have a diagnosis from when they were little kids in Yellowknife. I believe there was a pediatrician there at the time who was very actively involved in assessment and diagnosis. And mind you, that was 1980, so that was a long time ago. It wasn't like an assessment that they do nowadays. It was basically a history, physical exam at birth, and he, of course, had a lot of symptoms of alcohol withdrawal, so it wasn't difficult for the doctor to diagnose him. He's been reassessed several times since then and diagnosed by other experts, and it doesn't change.
It doesn't change because FASD is forever.
Yeah.
That's right.
So Diane Burrows is on the line. Diane, did you have any questions?
No, I'm okay that far. Other than perhaps regarding, you mentioned that you were in the criminal system for a bit.
Yes, yes.
What was your, when you went through the court process, what was that like? Like, was FAS given an understanding, or did anybody have any appreciation of it, or?
Well, in the court process, my going through the court system was a bit different for me than most adults with FAS who go through the court system. As for me, I didn't actually have to go into the courts and hear a judge speak to me and read my rights and all this other stuff and blah, 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 blah. I had Carrie and my mother who talked with the probation officer and talked with the police, and they figured out a way that would be better for me than to me to be sitting in jail for the next year and a half.
Absolutely.
And it just made it, and they gave me basically kind of a different pathway that would be anger management, AA, meetings every day, and just different stuff, so I wouldn't be having to sit in the jail all the time. Because, to be honest, for any adult with FASD who goes through the court system, to go into jail, that's not going to learn, that's not going to teach them a lesson. It won't. And so this way, to be, it really helped me. It really helped me going to meetings, going to anger management, and not being behind bars. That wouldn't teach me. It wouldn't teach me nothing. So I'm really glad that I went the path that I did, and basically learned along the way as to, a healthier life.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matthew. I'm glad to hear that things were understood for you.
Yes.
And I think that part of that happened because his primary caregiver has done a lot of community involvement and education, specifically around Matt's disability and his needs. She's spoken to police in his neighborhood. She's spoken to ambulance crews. Matthew once called 911 for cutting his finger washing dishes. And they came, and they bandaged it, and they taught him what to do the next time something like that happened.
Wow.
So I've been so impressed by the professional responses in Victoria for my son.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So just on the topic of the criminal justice system, I just read something just really recently this past week that a bill was passed in Parliament.
Yeah, I don't think it was passed yet. It's gone into second reading.
Oh, okay. Okay. And do you know anything about that?
Yes, it's from our local MP, Larry Bagnall, and it's a request for FASD to be taken into consideration around sentencing, around or judges ordering assessments and things like that. So it's an important change in the criminal justice system. From my perspective, I don't believe our kids should ever get near the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. If health and education and social services were doing their jobs properly everywhere in Canada, then our kids would be safe all the time and protected, and there'd be no secrecy around their diagnoses or what's wrong with them. The biggest handicap that I see is that the diagnosis is kept secret and nobody talks about it. all they talk about is the kids' behavior.
Well, yeah, I agree.
I agree too.
Me too.
Which kind of touches a bit on the stigma associated with FASD. Do you find that that's a barrier?
I find that it's interesting that a lot of people, the only knowledge they have of FASD is around the criminal justice system, because that's the only time our kids are in the media.
That's so true.
Yeah, our jails are full of kids with FASD.
Right.
They are.
And if we're going to build jails for them, why don't we build homes for them when they're little and keep them safe so they don't have to go to that jail? They can stay in what some people call jails for people with disabilities.
So other than FASD and the education system, would you say that that would be an important topic for foster parents to learn about, or can you make some other suggestions of workshop topics?
I think that one thing that foster parents really need to think about seriously is how committed they are to the kids. Because these are not kids who are going to disappear from the world when they're 18 and miraculously become functional adults. These are kids that are going to need those foster parents to be involved until they're 40 or 50. And I don't know how many foster parents can make that degree of commitment. But that's really what the kids need.
That is what they need. I agree.
True that.
And I have to admit, I would never have thought that at 75 I'd still be parenting. But it's better than not doing it.
That's right. Think of all the things that you and Matt have gone through and where he is today. It's really quite amazing, actually, his success that he's experiencing today.
Yeah.
And that is in large part because of your strong advocacy and Matt's, his strength and his tenacity to keep moving forward.
But there were lots of days when I used to think, he might be safer if he did die.
Wow.
But I don't have that concern anymore.
No.
I know he's going to be safe.
Yes.
That's got to be a nice feeling.
It is.
Well, it's wonderful to know the fact that my mom has always been a powerhouse. And the awesome thing about my mom is that she advocated for me through verbal and through, she pushed down doors and blew out windows to keep me happy and healthy and safe and do well in life. And if you said, I don't think that's going to work, my mother wouldn't have it.
Wow.
She wouldn't have it. She'd be like, no, that's not going to work for me. I don't think so. And my mom would just tell it as it is, and then they'd listen.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's amazing how your whole friendship base and even family base changes when you're in this boat.
Matt, did you find that's where you learned your advocacy skills, was from watching your mom advocate for you?
I think, yeah. I believe that I became myself a strong advocate person because of my mother and because watching her throughout the years of doing 30 years, almost 30 years, 20 years, Mom, of FAS advocacy.
Yeah.
And watching her, go into an office every day from 9 in the morning till 5 at night and deal with more than 30 clients who have FASD or are being diagnosed or going through the court system, and just that whole being a powerhouse of knowledge and helping other families and just trying to keep those guys alive was just amazing to watch. So I, in that sense, wanted to kind of be in that field, and I really for 6 years when I was working for the Cowichan Valley team, I really enjoyed that because I loved teaching what my mom taught. It was great.
That was an amazing team in the Cowichan Valley. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if every kid with FASD could have 6 years of that experience, their lives would be completely different.
Wow.
yeah, I hear a workshop, and much more than a workshop, but just information to start. But how to advocate for people with FASD, but how to teach people with FASD to advocate for themselves.
Well, yeah, even if they can't get out there and do the actual advocacy, the fact that they really understand who they are makes such a difference for them.
Mm-hmm.
I bet it would, yeah.
And getting children to to graduate with their FASD, I think is a thing that all parents or caregivers should strive for. What are the top things that you did to make sure that happened?
I think the biggest thing was the modification of the curriculum. He has not graduated with an academic degree. He has graduated with a modified program that has taught him how to live in his world.
Would you say that was strength-based curriculum for him?
Definitely, definitely.
And my next question after that, then, if people with a disability can graduate, do you think that anyone wanting to go to university or college with a disability can go in this day and age with the right
Not yet. I would have to say that it's pretty unusual. I mean, when the program in BC gets 6 to 10 students a year through, that means that there's an awful lot of kids that aren't able to go.
Right. And the reason I say that, there's so many post-majority supports that are, coming out right now for previous youth in care who have aged out, or for even educational supports. If you've only been in care for 1 year of your life, there's a lot out there. And I just keep on thinking of ways on how to teach caregivers on how to let those children and youth know they have a choice.
Well, someone has to help them do it.
Yeah.
They can't just have no safe place to live or live sporadically supported. All of that has to be in place first before they can do supported post-basic education.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have a lot of people with FASD here in the Yukon who go to the Yukon College, but the majority of them are there doing upgrading. And some of them love it because they love the experience of being supported in a college setting, but some of them want to be cooks, and they can't pass the basic English test to get into the cooking course.
Right.
Well, that's discrimination.
Right.
Any way you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we've still got a long way to go.
We do. We do have a long way to go.
Yeah. There are a lot of trades that our kids love to do. We have a lot of people with FASD in the Yukon and Alaska and all through the States become smoke jumpers or firefighters during the forest fire seasons. It's seasonal work, so they get some time off. They make good money. There's lots of risk, but they develop a circle of support within the rest of those guys that really keeps them going. They love that kind of thing. There's always work for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to find out what they like to do and find it.
Mm-hmm. Natalie, are you still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh. I was just wondering if you had anything to add to the conversation in terms of being a person.
I think, is everybody clear on who Carrie is?
Sorry, on who Carrie is?
Carrie is? Yeah, because he wasn't really formally introduced as his primary support worker at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, and Matt has lived with her for how long?
Oh, 16 years?
Yeah, 16 years in Victoria.
That's a pretty major commitment.
Yeah, and she he texted with her every 3 hours, and now they're not living together, but that
2 hours.
The 2 hours, yeah. So I just wanted to let people know that too, because that's a major part of his success is is having that sort of foundational person there who he lived with and also just checks in with. So just wanted to make sure people knew that.
So Judy, were you instrumental in setting that up?
Well, yeah, when Matt first started at the Canadian College of Performing Arts, his first family that he lived with couldn't handle his stresses. So
They couldn't handle themselves.
I know, Matt. And so I put a notice up in the locker room at the Queen Victoria Hospital, and this woman phoned me and said that she used to live in the Yukon and she had a son with Down syndrome, and she was using a woman nowadays for respite that she would recommend. So I phoned this woman, and this woman said, hey, why don't I just call him and have him over for supper and see what he thinks? And they've been together ever since.
Judy, are you familiar with microboards?
Yes, we have a microboard. It's fabulous because we get the funding, the microboard, which is primarily my relatives, and we get the funding that Community Living BC would normally spend on Matthew, and he qualified initially for 19 hours of support a week, and then after a few crises, they upped it to 31 hours a week. Of course, my first question was, 19 hours? What about the other 5 every 24? They meant a week and I meant a day, but so we get this bucket of money, and we are able to hire support workers to do specific things with him. And so he has his primary support worker who has to keep in touch with him every 2 to 3 hours. And if she doesn't hear from him, she then calls the police, because we all know, Carrie knows, Matthew knows, and I know, that if he can't contact his worker within 3 hours, he's in danger. And we're not going to piddle-fart around about it. We're going to get somebody in there now to help him. So that has worked really well. He hasn't had to have a phone call to the police in ages and ages and ages. But at least that safeguard is always there for him. And then the other support workers help him with his grocery shopping, his cooking, take him to yoga, his Zumba classes.
Curricular activities.
What? Say it again?
Curricular activities.
Extracurricular activities.
Extracurricular activities.
Yeah. All those things that make his life so much better.
Mm.
It keeps me busy.
Plus, they're really like paid friends. They have all really become personal friends of Matthew's. And so their friends are friends of Matthew's. So it just puts a big circle of people who care about him around him.
That's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned several times now that Matt receives support through community living services?
Right. They give us the money and we hire the supports.
Right, and everything goes through the microboard.
Right.
Okay. How difficult was that to access services through community living?
Not hard at all, because as it turned out, I'm not really a nice person. And so after a few meetings with them, they were just thrilled to get us away from them.
I wouldn't comment on that one.
But I think they didn't initially step in when Matt went down there because he wasn't a BC resident. And it took nearly 5 years getting more assessments, proving to them that he really did leave down there, that he really was disabled and all that, before they agreed to provide any kind of financial supports for him.
Right. I find that it's so difficult for people to grasp that people with FASD actually have a disability because everything's so hidden.
Yeah.
Oh, it's invisible, and I find that, that any time that people seem to think that when I say I have FASD, they go, no, you don't. You act totally normal. You talk and act and walk and sing and dance and everything. You look as normal as the next person beside you, And I'm like, well, that's why you call it an invisible disability. And that's where the trouble begins, as to people thinking that I'm totally normal and act and talk and do things so well that, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, I may be like that, but I will need help and support in other areas of my life for the rest of my life.
Right. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? I think that was absolutely fantastic.
I agree.
That was
Totally.
Good.
Thank you so much.
really, really great information. I really appreciate that you took the time to spend this time with us.
You're so very welcome. Thank you, Janet.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and Judy and Natalie, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. What a great...
Jack, Matthew.
Sorry.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Judy Pakozdy.